I'm sure it's going to be amazing. So, we're just really, really excited, really happy to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited to see the show, and we love our outfits. So iconic, British, and just to see the evolution to use the same pattern in different ways is really amazing.
I agree.
This was never just a wedding. It was a corporate merger disguised as a love story. One golden heir from the legendary Beckham family. One billionaire princess from the untouchable Peltz family. And a marriage that looked perfect, until the silence got louder than the applause. Because here's the question nobody dared to ask out loud. Why did the Peltz family never truly embrace Brooklyn Beckham? Why were private meetings happening behind closed doors? Why were contracts thicker than wedding vows? And why did insiders whisper that Brooklyn wasn't being welcomed, he was being evaluated? At first, it looked like fairy tale luxury. Private jets, champagne towers, designer everything. But behind those glittering chandeliers, cold stares, strategic pauses, calculated smiles. Sources now claim that from day one, certain members of Nicola Peltz's inner circle didn't see Brooklyn as a partner. They saw him as a liability. Too emotional, too unfocused, too unpredictable for an empire built on precision. And when empires feel threatened, they don't argue. They restructure. So the real question is, did Brooklyn marry into love? Or did he walk straight into a system that never intended to make him equal? And trust me, this is where it gets ugly. Because when Brooklyn Beckham stepped into the Peltz world, something shifted immediately. Not publicly, not on camera, but internally. The Beckham family had always operated on legacy, emotion, loyalty, image. They built influence through charisma and cultural dominance. David Beckham was a master of discipline. Victoria Beckham was strategy wrapped in elegance. Together, they created an empire that thrived on visibility. The Peltz family? They thrived on silence. Nelson Peltz didn't need headlines. He didn't need applause. His power moved through contracts, boardrooms, and numbers that most people can't even pronounce. Where the Beckhams built fame, the Peltzes built leverage. And Brooklyn? Brooklyn was raised in one system, but married into another. At first, everything looked smooth. Luxury estates, joint appearances, carefully staged smiles. Nicola Peltz standing beside Brooklyn like a perfectly polished power couple straight out of a billion-dollar brand campaign. But insiders began noticing something strange. Brooklyn stopped speaking first. He started deferring decisions. Interviews that once felt natural now sounded rehearsed. Even small things, event schedules, partnerships, travel, reportedly began going through Peltz advisors. Not assistants. Advisors. Let that sink in. When a newly married man suddenly needs strategic clearance for personal decisions, that's not romance. That's restructuring. Behind the velvet curtains of Peltz Properties, meetings were happening that didn't include Brooklyn. Financial analysts reviewing exposure risk. Brand consultants evaluating long-term value. Private legal teams drafting layers of protection clauses so complex they reportedly required multiple revisions. Protection from what? That's where the whispers get louder. Some sources claim Nelson Peltz never questioned Brooklyn's heart. He questioned his direction. Photography, culinary ventures, lifestyle branding, creative pivots every few months. A dynasty obsessed with stability and dominance that didn't look like versatility. It looked like unpredictability. And unpredictability is expensive. The tension didn't explode overnight. It simmered. At formal Peltz gatherings, Brooklyn was polite, observant, slightly quieter than usual. Those who watched closely said he often scanned rooms before speaking, as if calculating the temperature before entering a conversation. That's not how he grew up. In the Beckham world, presence was instinctual. You walked in and owned the room. In the Peltz world, you studied the room first. And slowly, very slowly, Brooklyn began adapting. He dressed sharper, spoke less, smiled strategically. Even his social media tone shifted, more refined, less spontaneous. Gone were the messy, impulsive posts. In their place, controlled captions, coordinated visuals, corporate-level polish. Coincidence? Or conditioning? The first Real crack appeared during what insiders now call the review dinner. An intimate gathering at the Peltz estate. No press. No cameras. Just core family members and 2 external consultants flown in from overseas. Consultants. At a family dinner. According to someone who claims to have been present, the conversation turned unexpectedly formal. Brooklyn's long-term vision was brought up. His brand identity, his financial trajectory, his 5-year projection. Projection. As if he were a startup. As if he were a portfolio asset. The tone, allegedly, wasn't hostile. It was analytical. And that may have been worse. Because when someone critiques you calmly, methodically, without emotion, it hits differently. One source described Brooklyn leaving that dinner visibly shaken but trying not to show it.
And it was as simple as that. Yeah, I mean, I think also we both come from families that work really hard. Both of our parents work really hard. We're very working class.
Be honest.
I am being honest. I am being
What car
honest.
did your dad drive you to school in?
So my dad did.
No, one answer.
My dad.
What car was it?
Alright, it's not a simple answer
What
because
car did you get your dad to drive?
it depends.
No.
Okay, in the 80s, my dad had a Rolls Royce.
Another claimed Nicola remained composed, quietly reassuring him afterward, insisting it was just how business families operate. But here's where it gets interesting. Shortly after that dinner, legal revisions were reportedly made to certain joint agreements. Clauses tightened. Exit structures clarified. Asset boundaries reinforced. Again, all normal in elite circles. But the timing? That's what raised eyebrows. Meanwhile, back in the Beckham family, David and Victoria noticed changes too. Calls became shorter. Visits became less frequent. Conversations that once felt open now felt filtered. At first, they assumed it was marriage adjustment. Newlyweds building their own rhythm. But then came something that sent quiet shockwaves. Brooklyn requested that all future major communications involving shared business matters be directed through formal representatives. Formal representatives. From son to structure. From family to framework. To the Beckhams, that didn't feel like independence. It felt like distance engineered with precision. And here's where speculation turns into something heavier. Some observers believe Nelson Peltz never intended to reject Brooklyn outright. That would have been messy, public, emotional. Instead, the strategy, if there was one, was subtle integration. Absorb him into the Peltz system. Limit outside influence. Reframe his narrative. Rebuild his identity under a new architecture. Not malicious. Just efficient. But efficiency in relationships can feel like control. And control, when disguised as protection, is nearly impossible to confront. Because what do you argue against? Security? Stability? Financial safeguards? On paper, everything looked responsible. Behind closed doors, everything felt colder. Brooklyn reportedly began spending more time within Peltz properties. Fewer spontaneous trips. More structured commitments. New advisors, new routines. Even his professional projects began aligning closer to Peltz-backed networks. Suddenly, doors opened. But only specific ones. Selective exposure. Selective opportunity. Selective alignment. To outsiders, it looked like elevation. To critics, it looked like enclosure. And in the middle of all this stood Nicola Peltz. Calm. Poised. Unapologetically loyal to her empire. Some call her protective. Others call her strategic. But one thing is undeniable. She never left her system. Brooklyn did. That asymmetry matters. Because when one partner relocates entirely, emotionally, socially, structurally, and the other remains anchored, the balance shifts. Gradually. Quietly. Until one day, you wake up and realize you're operating inside someone else's framework. That doesn't mean Brooklyn was powerless. It means he was adapting. An adaptation, under the right pressure, can look exactly like surrender. Still, nothing had exploded publicly yet. No dramatic statements. No official conflicts. Just a steady, calculated drift. Until the whispers became patterns. Until patterns became questions. And until one detail surfaced that made even neutral observers uncomfortable, Brooklyn's independent projects began requiring Peltz-level approvals for external partnerships. Approvals. Not suggestions. Approvals. Now ask yourself something. If a man needs clearance to pursue his own creative ventures, is he building an empire? Or reporting to one? And this is only the beginning. Because the real fracture didn't happen in boardrooms. It happened when emotion collided with structure. And once that collision occurred, there was no going back. The shift didn't go unnoticed. At first, It was just murmurs inside private circles. Then it became patterns. And then, it became public. Brooklyn Beckham, once known for unpredictable passion projects and emotional spontaneity, started appearing different. Sharper. Controlled. Almost curated. His interviews became shorter. His tone more measured. He no longer joked freely about family chaos or creative confusion. Every sentence sounded intentional. Structured. Approved. Approved by who? That's when speculation ignited. Because around the same time Brooklyn's voice grew more refined, something else grew louder. Distance between him and the Beckham family. Public events that once featured David Beckham's proud arm around his son suddenly featured empty space. Victoria Beckham's subtle but powerful social media tributes? Gone. Joint appearances? Reduced. Then eliminated entirely. The official explanation? Scheduling conflicts. Creative differences. Adult independence. But insiders whispered a different version. They claimed that following a tense private exchange between the two dynasties, Brooklyn made a decision that stunned even those closest to him. He would redefine boundaries. That phrase alone sent shockwaves. Redefine boundaries with the family that built you? What boundaries needed redefining? Sources claim that during a confidential conversation, described as calm but emotionally charged, Brooklyn told his parents he was tired of being managed through legacy. Managed through legacy. Translation? He no longer wanted to operate under the Beckham blueprint. That would have been understandable. But what came next is what changed everything. He allegedly insisted that any future discussions regarding his public narrative, brand direction, or joint ventures be handled through formal intermediaries. Not directly. Intermediaries. Lawyers. Advisors. Brand strategists. Suddenly, a father-son disagreement felt like a corporate negotiation, and the Beckham family was not prepared for that pivot. David built his empire on directness, loyalty, face-to-face accountability. The Peltz family built theirs on paperwork. So when Brooklyn chose paperwork, it wasn't just a procedural choice. It was symbolic. Now here's where the tension truly escalated. Within weeks of that boundary shift, rumors began circulating that the Peltz family had initiated a risk assessment review regarding Brooklyn's independent ventures. Risk assessment review. That sounds harmless, right? Except insiders describe it differently. They claim Peltz financial consultants evaluated Brooklyn's past projects, photography exhibitions that didn't meet projections, culinary collaborations that fizzled, branding launches that stalled. Each one reportedly labeled as inconsistent output. Inconsistent output. That phrase hit like a verdict. Because in the Peltz world, inconsistency isn't personality. It's liability. One anonymous insider allegedly revealed that Nelson Peltz expressed concern that Brooklyn's creative volatility could impact long-term family positioning. Family positioning. Notice the language. Not marriage. Not happiness. Positioning. And once positioning enters the conversation, love exits quietly. The tension deepened when whispers emerged about a revised prenup addendum. Yes, revised. The original agreement was already airtight, designed to ensure financial separation and asset clarity. But according to speculation, additional clauses were discussed that would further compartmentalize business exposure. If true, that means one thing. The Peltz family wasn't just protecting wealth. They were protecting control. Meanwhile, Brooklyn's social world began narrowing. Longtime friends from the Beckham orbit reportedly found it harder to reach him. Invitations declined. Informal gatherings replaced by structured appearances. And when asked about it publicly, Brooklyn smiled calmly and said, "Growth requires evolution." Evolution. That word divided audiences instantly. Supporters praised his maturity. Critics questioned his autonomy. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. When someone evolves rapidly under a new power structure, it raises eyebrows. Especially when that structure is known for strategic dominance. Public reaction became explosive. Social media split into two camps. Team Beckham. Team Peltz. Some accused the Beckhams of emotional manipulation. Others accused the Peltzes of corporate absorption. Memes flooded timelines. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. Think pieces dissected body language in interviews frame by frame. One viral post claimed Brooklyn blinked too frequently when discussing independence. Another insisted Nicola Peltz's calm composure during public scrutiny proved she was 10 steps ahead. 10 steps ahead of what? No one knew, but the narrative was spiraling. Then came what insiders call the portfolio presentation. a private Peltz gathering where Brooklyn reportedly unveiled a new creative venture, a lifestyle brand concept blending culinary artistry, visual storytelling, and philanthropic initiatives. It was ambitious. It was polished. It was unrecognizable. Because those familiar with Brooklyn's earlier work said it felt different. Not amateur, not chaotic, but corporate, aligned, strategically optimized. And according to whispers, the project only moved forward after Peltz advisors completed feasibility calibrations. Feasibility calibrations. Again, harmless language, but heavy implications. Because when creativity requires calibration, spontaneity disappears. And when spontaneity disappears, identity shifts. Meanwhile, David and Victoria remained silent publicly. No retaliation, no public defense, just controlled poise. That silence spoke volumes. Because in elite circles, silence can be more powerful than confrontation. But privately, sources claim they were devastated. Not because Brooklyn married into wealth, but because they believed he was being reshaped. Reshaped without consent. Reshaped without resistance. Now pause for a moment. Is it possible Brooklyn simply chose stability? Yes. Is it possible he wanted structure over chaos? Absolutely. But when structure becomes filtration, when advisors become gatekeepers, when love begins sounding like liability management, the line blurs. And that blurred line is where controversy thrives. The most chilling detail? Brooklyn allegedly told a close confidant that he felt finally organized. Finally organized. Which begs the most dangerous question of all, was he chaotic before? Or was he just human? Because sometimes, the promise of order feels like salvation. Until you realize the price of order is control. And the Peltz family? They don't lose control. Not publicly. Not privately. Not ever. And as speculation reached fever pitch, one thing became painfully clear. This was no longer a quiet adjustment between two families. This was a philosophical war. Legacy versus leverage. Emotion versus efficiency. Charisma versus calculation. And Brooklyn Beckham stood exactly where those forces collided. Smiling. Composed. Insisting he had never felt more independent. But independence inside a system designed by someone else. Is that freedom? Or is that integration? Because integration is smooth. Integration is strategic. Integration is permanent. And if the rumors are even partially true, then the Peltz family didn't reject Brooklyn outright. They redefined him. And the moment you redefine someone, you own the narrative. And once you own the narrative, you own the outcome. And then, the silence broke. Not with shouting. Not with a press conference. But with absence. Brooklyn Beckham missed a Beckham family legacy gala that had been scheduled for over a year. Not just any event, this was the annual foundation night honoring the empire David Beckham and Victoria Beckham built from nothing. His seat was there. His name was printed. His absence was louder than any speech. Reporters noticed instantly. Cameras zoomed in on the empty chair like it was evidence in a courtroom drama. Social media exploded within minutes. Where was Brooklyn? The official answer? Prior commitments. But insiders claim the real reason was far more uncomfortable. Because that same weekend, Brooklyn was photographed attending a closed-door Peltz strategy retreat at a private mountain estate. Strategy retreat. Let that land. While one empire celebrated legacy, the other held recalibration sessions. And Brooklyn chose the recalibration. That decision didn't just bruise feelings. It confirmed alignment. From that moment forward, speculation wasn't speculation anymore. It was pattern recognition. Within weeks, financial analysts began dissecting Brooklyn's new ventures more aggressively than ever before. Anonymous reports claimed Peltz-backed legal teams were reviewing intellectual property ownership structures tied to Brooklyn's creative brand. Ownership structures. That phrase alone made critics uneasy. Because when empires draft ownership layers, they don't do it casually. They do it permanently. Then came the rumor that shook both circles to the core. A leaked memo, authenticity unverified but widely circulated, allegedly outlined a long-term integration model positioning Brooklyn as a brand ambassador under Peltz-controlled frameworks rather than an independent founder. Not partner. Not co-architect. Ambassador. If true, that would mean Brooklyn wasn't building his own empire. He was representing someone else's. The backlash was immediate. Commentators accused the Peltz family of corporate absorption. Others defended them, arguing they were simply protecting long-term stability, but the real fracture happened behind the scenes. Sources close to the Beckham family claim David finally broke his silence privately, expressing deep concern that Brooklyn was becoming structurally dependent. Structurally dependent. Not emotionally. Structurally. And that distinction matters. Because emotional loyalty can change. Structural contracts? Those don't bend easily. Meanwhile, Nicola Peltz remained publicly serene. Unbothered. Elegant. Her interviews reflected unwavering support for Brooklyn's evolution. She spoke about growth, about alignment, about shared vision. Shared vision. But observers couldn't ignore one subtle detail. Brooklyn rarely interrupted her anymore. He rarely expanded beyond her framing. He nodded. He affirmed. He agreed. Some saw partnership. Others saw synchronization. And synchronization in elite dynamics often means one system is stronger. Then came the financial ripple. Whispers emerged that certain Beckham-affiliated sponsors quietly paused exploratory collaborations with Brooklyn's new ventures. Not cancelled. Paused. Corporate language for hesitation. Because aligning with someone mid-power shift carries risk. Risk of instability. Risk of backlash. Risk of choosing the wrong empire. And if there's one thing corporate ecosystems fear more than failure, it's unpredictability. Suddenly, Brooklyn wasn't just navigating family tension. He was navigating perception volatility. His brand value became a debate topic on financial panels. Analysts dissected whether his pivot toward Peltz-aligned ventures would strengthen or diminish his independent appeal. It was no longer gossip. It was market conversation, and when markets talk, reputations fluctuate. Meanwhile, the Queen's Park Rangers coach gave a rare, carefully worded interview. He didn't attack anyone. He didn't accuse. He simply said, Brooklyn always wanted to belong. Sometimes belonging feels like safety. That line hit like a thunderclap. Because belonging and safety can look identical to structure and control. Until they aren't. Public sentiment grew darker. Online threads began questioning whether Brooklyn had sacrificed autonomy for stability. Supporters argued he was finally in an environment that demanded discipline. Critics argued discipline without independence becomes confinement. The Peltz family, of course, remained silent. Nelson Peltz issued no statement. No denial. No defense. And in power dynamics, silence isn't weakness. It's calculation. Because responding validates. Ignoring neutralizes. But here's the twist no one saw coming. A quiet internal audit reportedly surfaced within Peltz advisory circles questioning whether Brooklyn's public volatility, meaning the growing controversy, was becoming a reputational liability. Reputational liability. The very label once allegedly applied to his creative inconsistency now hovered over his public narrative. If integration was meant to stabilize him, why was tension escalating? And here's the uncomfortable possibility. Maybe this was never about rejection. Maybe it was about calibration gone too far. Because when you attempt to refine someone, you risk erasing them. And when erasure becomes visible, the public reacts. By now, the Beckham family had stopped subtle messaging entirely. No cryptic posts. No nostalgic callbacks. Just dignified silence. A silence that felt less like surrender, and more like waiting. Waiting for what? For clarity? For collapse? For Brooklyn to decide whether he was architect or accessory. The final fracture reportedly happened during a confidential strategy session where a Peltz advisor allegedly suggested tightening Brooklyn's media exposure until narrative stability returned. Tightening exposure. Limiting voice. Reducing unpredictability. And that's when insiders say Brooklyn pushed back for the first time. Not explosively, but firmly. Because even integration has limits. And when a man realizes his narrative is being optimized rather than lived, he begins asking dangerous questions. Questions like, who benefits from this structure? Who owns the outcome? And most importantly, who am I inside this system? As of now, no public rupture has occurred. No official split. No dramatic declarations. But the tension? It's thicker than ever. Two empires. Two philosophies. One man in the center. And the haunting reality that in elite ecosystems, acceptance isn't emotional. It's strategic. So was Brooklyn Beckham never accepted by the Peltz family? Or was he accepted conditionally? On terms. On structure. On performance. Because conditional acceptance feels like opportunity. Until you realize conditions can change. And when conditions shift inside a billionaire empire, the consequences aren't emotional. They are structural. And structural consequences last forever. And now, The real question isn't whether Brooklyn Beckham was accepted. It's whether he was ever meant to be equal. Because when you strip away the headlines, the polished interviews, the curated family photos, what's left? A legacy empire built on blood, the Beckham family. A billionaire dynasty built on leverage, the Peltz family. And one man standing in the middle, trying to prove he isn't just an extension of either. So ask yourself this. If everything was healthy, why does every new detail feel like a power move instead of a love story? Why does every business shift look like positioning? Why does every silence feel strategic? Is Brooklyn evolving into something stronger under Pelt's discipline? Or is he slowly becoming the most expensive rebrand in modern empire politics? And here's the part nobody wants to admit. Sometimes control doesn't look like control. Sometimes it looks like opportunity. Sometimes it sounds like support. Until one day you wake up and realize your name is still yours. But the infrastructure around it isn't. So what do you think? Was this rejection from the start? Or was it conditional acceptance wrapped in luxury and loyalty? Is Brooklyn Beckham building his own throne? Or sitting on one that can be pulled out at any time? Drop your take below. Because in battles between dynasties, the truth doesn't explode. It leaks. And we're just getting started.